The wind dragged dust across the empty main street of Dry Creek, rattling old boards loose on shuttered storefronts. Evening light slid low, copper red against the buttes, stretching the shadows of gallows posts like long black fingers over the dirt. They had not hung anyone here in 3 years, yet the town still kept the rope tied, coiled stiff and waiting. A symbol, like a reminder carved in the air, that the crowd could judge faster than God. Mara Kincaid walked beneath it that night, her shawl pulled tight against the desert cold. Widow, they whispered. Witch, some spat. Betrayer. She had buried her husband 2 winters back, a ranch hand who froze in the high passes with cattle still tied to his rope. Folk said she didn't mourn enough. Others claimed soldiers who raided Apache camps got their directions from her, though she never set foot near the fort. In towns like this, a woman without kin, without protection, became a canvas where men painted their fears. Children threw pebbles at her back when they thought she wouldn't turn. Women clutched rosaries when she passed, not out of piety but spite. Mara had grown used to silence, though the silence cut worse than words. She had learned to walk steady, eyes fixed forward, every step measured like she carried a noose around her throat already. That evening, she stopped at the saloon door, not to drink, she had no money left for that, but to ask if the work she begged for each week had opened up. Cleaning, sewing, anything. The barkeep wiped his hands on a rag and told her to move along. His voice was flat, but the men on stools laughed under their breath. She left without a word, though her hands itched to slam the door hard enough to shatter glass. Her cabin roof leaked. The nights had grown colder. A widow without a fire would not last past first snow. When she reached her place on the edge of town, she found a rider waiting. Horse tall, dust still rising from hooves. The man dismounted slow, moving like his joints ached from years and wars. Broad shoulders beneath a duster coat, hat brim low enough to keep his eyes hidden. He didn't speak until she set her hand on the door latch. "You need a roof," he said, his voice dry as mesquite bark. She turned, clutching her shawl tighter. "And you need what?" He hesitated. "A wife. Tonight. Tomorrow don't matter. Folks don't trust a man running land alone. They whisper. They doubt." His face, when she saw it, was lined deep, sunburnt, scar down his jaw. Not young, not gentle. A man hollowed out by battles, maybe by graves of his own. She nearly laughed at the bluntness of it. "You think to claim me like stock? I've already been branded once by this town." "I ain't branding you," he answered. "I'm offering you walls that don't leak. Firewood stacked for the winter. Nobody else will step forward. You know that." Silence stretched between them, brittle as frost. The rope on the gallows seemed to sway in her memory. She thought of the names, the spit, the empty cupboard. She thought of her husband's coat, stiff with snow, lowered into frozen dirt without a prayer. At last, she said, "Then say it plain. This is a bargain, not a rescue." His eyes softened, barely. "Call it what you will. But come morning, you won't be alone against the wind." She let her hand slip from the latch. The door creaked open, black inside. Behind her, the horse snorted, stamping hooves against stone. Somewhere in town, a church bell struck, echoing across the cold night like a warning or a promise. And so began the bargain, born of need, not love. Yet bargains in the West were often written in blood, dust, and rope. Morning broke gray, the sky swollen with the smell of rain that would never fall. Dry Creek rose early, dust already lifting as wagons creaked down the main street. Folks gathered at the well, the mercantile, the church steps. And word traveled quicker than any rider. Mara Kincaid had been taken in by the widower Colter Hayes. Colter had fought in the war. No one knew which side, maybe both. He had come west after, dragging a busted leg and a hunger for silence. Bought a patch of land where cottonwoods bent over a shallow creek. Kept to himself. Folk said his cattle wandered lean, but he never asked a soul for help. Some claimed he still woke screaming at night. Others whispered he had killed a man or two for less than a spilled drink. Now they said he had claimed the widow. No preacher, no papers, no witnesses but the stars. In this country, sometimes that was enough. Other times, it was a rope's work. When Mara stepped into town beside him that morning, her shawl pulled close, her eyes set firm though her stomach nodded, every face turned. Men stopped hammering nails. Women held bread in midair. Children hushed, wide-eyed. The silence pressed down like a storm about to break. One man spat, which found her war dog. Another claimed her, did he? Like claiming a mule. And softer still, from a woman with pity sour on her tongue. Poor thing. Better a roof than the dirt. Coulter kept walking, his limp more pronounced in the hard-packed street. Mara followed, her back straight though she could feel the weight of 100 stairs. She thought of how quickly the rope could swing again if the crowd decided. At the mercantile, Coulter bought flour, coffee, kerosene. Paid in silver coins dulled by years of handling. Mara stood beside him, pretending not to hear the snickers behind her, the whispers of already warming his bed. Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself still. The storekeep, a man with a wide belly and narrow eyes, said loud enough for all to hear, "Strange times when a soldier takes in a widow without a word to the preacher." Coulter's hand stilled on the counter. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Strange times, when a man can't buy flour without hearing gossip. The room hushed. The storekeep swallowed hard. Coulter's reputation, wild, uncertain, edged with rumor of violence, did what it was meant to do. Still, the damage had been done. Mara felt the shame like a brand pressed hot against her skin. Outside, as they loaded the sack onto his horse, Mara whispered, "You didn't have to answer for me." He didn't look at her. "I wasn't answering for you. I was answering for myself. A man don't like being laughed at." She bit her tongue, tasting copper where she had bitten too hard. She wanted to tell him that every word cut her, not him. But the words stuck. Pride was all she had left, and pride rarely fed the hungry. They rode back toward his ranch, dust swirling behind. At the edge of town, she heard the sound that broke her silence. Laughter, high and mean, from a boy no older than 12. He had picked up a length of rope, swung it in a loop, and called out, "Better keep her tied, mister, before she runs off again." The crowd chuckled, some nervously, some cruel. Mara's face burned, but she did not lower her head. She stopped walking. The boy faltered, rope drooping at his side. The moment stretched, brittle. And then it happened, a small crack of defiance. From the church steps, an old man's voice, rough with age, spoke out, "Put that rope down, boy. Shame's on those who mock, not on those who endure." The boy froze, cheeks red, before tossing the rope aside. The crowd murmured, unsettled. Mara's chest ached, not with relief but with something sharper, proof that not all voices in Dry Creek were against her. Coulter glanced at her, just once, before turning back to the trail. The old man's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The rope still lay in the dirt behind them as they rode. A symbol, waiting to be claimed, buried, or burned. Coulter's ranch sat 2 miles out, where the creek cut shallow and cottonwoods leaned like tired sentries. The house was rough-built, squared logs with chinking long cracked, but solid enough against the wind. The barn slouched beside it, patched with tin, smelling of horses and hay. A stack of firewood lay piled neat as a soldier's bedroll. One proof, at least, that the man thought ahead. Mara stepped down from the horse stiffly, her skirts dusted brown. The quiet here felt different than in town, less like judgment, more like a wound stitched but still bleeding. She held her shawl close as Coulter pushed the door open, letting stale air spill out, tinged with kerosene and smoke. Inside, a table scarred with knife cuts, 2 chairs, a stove blackened from years of use. A single shelf held a Bible, a tin plate, and a rusted lantern. On the wall hung a war saber, its scabbard worn smooth. No curtains, no softness, no sign of laughter ever having lived here. "This is it," he said, voice flat. "Roof don't leak. Stove eats wood fast, but it holds heat." Mara nodded. Her husband's cabin had been smaller, but it had smelled of leather and tobacco, of life shared. Here, she smelled only the long echo of a man alone. She set her bundle on the table. What little she owned, 2 dresses, her husband's coat, a cracked comb. That was all the world had left her. Coulter poured water into a tin cup and set it down without a word. She drank, though the metal tasted bitter. "You'll take the bed," he said finally. "And you?" "I've slept on worse than the floor." Mara wanted to argue, wanted to say she could manage the floor, that she'd endured colder nights, but pride again silenced her. Instead, she began to sweep the floor with a worn broom leaned against the corner. The dust rose in little storms, catching the last red of sunset through the window. Hours later, When the fire burned low, she lay in his bed stiffly, blankets rough against her cheek. She stared at the roof beams, thinking of the town's eyes, the boy's rope, the old man's voice. Outside, coyotes yipped at the edge of the dark, their cries carrying across the empty land. She wondered if she had traded one noose for another. Sleep was shallow, broken by dreams of her husband's frozen face, of ropes tightening, of laughter in the dark. Each time she woke, she heard Coulter's breathing from the floor, steady, controlled, like a man who had taught himself never to sleep too deep. By dawn, the fire had burned to ash. She rose, her hands already blistered from splitting kindling, though she had not done the work yet. She boiled coffee, thin and bitter, and placed the cup before him without speaking. He nodded, nothing more. That was their pact for the day. But as she stepped outside to fetch water from the creek, her eyes caught something half buried in the dirt by the barn. A length of rope, frayed but coiled, left behind from some forgotten chore. She stared at it, her throat tightening. The townsfolk's laughter echoed in her ears. The boy's mocking loop. Coulter came up behind her, following her gaze. He didn't reach for the rope. Just said, low and quiet, "Don't matter what they think. Rope's only rope till you let it hang you." Her fingers trembled, wanting to bury it, to burn it, to tear it strand by strand. But she only bent down, lifted it, and set it across the fence post. A choice, perhaps, left for another day. Behind them, the wind carried the faint sound of a church bell, though the church was miles away. It sounded like warning, or like fate clearing its throat. The days settled into rhythm, though no peace lived in them. Mara worked as if the place might crumble without her, scrubbing the floorboards till her knuckles bled, stitching Coulter's torn shirts by firelight, mending tack in the barn where the smell of horse sweat clung thick. She cooked simple meals, though flour ran low, and salted meat was tougher than rawhide. Coulter seldom spoke, but when he did, it was plain words about fence lines or cattle straying too near the arroyo. He carried himself like a man who had forgotten how to share a table, how to fill silence with anything but the sound of his boots. Yet slowly, small cracks showed in the iron. One evening, when she bent to lift a water bucket near the well, he took it from her hands without a word, carrying the weight as if it were his duty. Another night, when coyotes howled close and she startled awake, he only said, "They won't cross the fire. Go back to sleep." Not tenderness, just steadiness. And somehow steadiness was rarer than kindness in her world. But in town, the whispers grew sharper. Mara felt them even when she was not there, like smoke carried on the wind. Women wagged tongues at the church steps, calling her shameless for lying in a man's house without the Lord's blessing. Men muttered she had bewitched Coulter same as she had betrayed her husband's kin. The storekeep started shorting her flour, slipping stones in the sack. She said nothing, only carried the burden home. When Coulter saw the stones, he said nothing too, but the next week he went himself. After that, the storekeep weighed his flour careful as gold. Still, the rope lingered. One afternoon, Mara rode into town for kerosene. She tied the mare outside, skirts dusted from the trail, and found herself face to face with Sheriff Dunn. He was a tall man gone soft, belly pressing against his vest, mustache yellowed from chew. His eyes, though, were sharp with the pleasure of holding power over the weak. "You've been keeping company with Hayes," he drawled, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Strange choice, for a God-fearing woman. Folk say you've no papers, no preacher's word. That makes you no wife." "Makes you?" His smile curved mean. "Something else." Her jaw tightened. "I keep no company but my own." "Careful," he said, leaning close enough that she smelled tobacco and sweat. "A woman alone's got few rights, and a woman living in sin's got none." She pushed past, but the words clung to her like burrs. When she returned home, Coulter was mending fence posts. She set the kerosene down harder than she meant to. He looked up, one brow raised. "They'll never forgive me," she said, voice raw. "Doesn't matter what I do. The rope is already around my neck." Coulter hammered the post into place, slow and steady. "Then we cut the rope before it tightens." Her laugh was bitter. "And how do you cut gossip? How do you cut the lies of men who want me buried?" He didn't answer right away. At last, he straightened, resting on his bad leg. "You outwork em. You outlive em. Only thing that shuts a mouth is proof a body won't die when they're expected to." That night, as firelight flickered across the log walls, Mara turned those words over. Outwork. Outlive. Survival as defiance. But fate has ways of testing words sooner than a soul is ready. 2 nights later, horses thundered across the ridge. Mara rose from bed to see torches bobbing in the dark, moving toward the ranch. Shadows of riders, voices shouting curses. The firelight from their torches lit the cottonwoods like ghosts. The rope she had left coiled on the fence post was gone. Her blood went cold. The night cracked open with the sound of hooves. Mara sat up in the bed, heart pounding, as the windows pulsed with orange light. Shouts carried on the wind, men's voices, drunk with purpose, calling her name like a curse. Coulter was already at the door, rifle in hand. He did not look back at her. "Stay inside," he said. His voice was low, even, but edged with steel. Through the slats she saw them, 6 riders, torches raised, circling the yard. Flames licked the cottonwoods, shadows dancing long across the barn. Their faces were one she knew, storekeep, blacksmith's boy, 2 ranch hands who had once begged her husband for wages. And at the front, astride a pale horse, Sheriff Dunn with his belly tied against the saddle. The sheriff's voice rolled across the night. "Coulter Hayes. Hand her over. Widow Kincaid's no wife, no saint. She's a blight, a whore, a witch. She'll swing, and you won't stand in God's way." A torch landed near the barn wall, sparks flaring in the dry hay. Mara's breath caught. Coulter stepped forward, boot grinding it out, rifle raised at his hip. His face was carved stone, shadows etching his scar deeper. "She stays," he said. The crowd shifted, uneasy. The rifle in his hands carried more weight than words, but they were many, and he was one. The sheriff sneered. "Then you swing with her." And then she saw it, the rope. Coiled in the sheriff's hand, the noose swaying in torchlight. The same frayed loop that had hung on their fence post, stolen from her sight. Her throat closed. It wasn't just rope anymore. It was her name, her shame, twisted into hemp. Coulter's rifle didn't waver. First man takes a step, dies where he stands. A silence fell, heavy as stone. Horses stamped nervously, sensing the line drawn in the dust. The mob wavered, courage thinning in the face of iron. But the sheriff leaned in his saddle, smile slick. "You think you'll scare us off, Hayes? You're broken. You limp. You're half a ghost already. When you fall, who'll bury her then?" It should have ended there, in blood or fire. But from the shadows came a sound that cut through, a child's voice. "No more rope." The riders startled. From the edge of the yard stood a boy, the same who had mocked Mara days ago. His face pale, his hand shaking, but his words carried like a shot. "Leave her be. Ain't right." The silence deepened. Even the torches seemed to sputter. The sheriff glared, but something had cracked. Behind him, one ranch hand shifted in the saddle, lowering his torch. Another muttered, "Maybe enough's enough." The crowd was no longer one beast but many men, each suddenly alone with his conscience. Coulter took that breath of hesitation and drove it home. He fired, not at a man, but at the noose. The rope flew from the sheriff's hand, splintered by lead, falling into the dirt like a snake killed in strike. Smoke curled from the barrel. Coulter's voice was quiet but carried. "A rope don't judge. Men do. And tonight, you've been judged wanting." The sheriff's smile faltered. He turned his horse with a curse, spitting into the dust. One by one, the riders peeled away, torches dimming into the hills. The boy lingered a heartbeat longer, staring at Mara. She held his gaze, and for the first time in years, a child did not look at her with scorn. He looked at her with shame, with something close to respect. When the yard was empty, Coulter lowered his rifle. Mara stepped from the doorway into the night. The rope lay in the dirt, torchlight fading from its fibers. Coulter met her eyes. "What do you want done with it?" Her hand shook, but her voice was steady. "Burn it. Tonight." And so, in silence, they fed the noose to the fire. It curled, blackened, and turned to ash, sparks spinning into the stars like prayers finally freed. But ash never forgets. And neither does a town. Dawn crept slow, pale gray bleeding across the horizon. The yard smelled of smoke and scorched hay. The rope was gone, its ash scattered in the fire pit, but the shape of it still lingered in Mara's mind, like a bruise you couldn't rub out. Coulter sat on the porch steps, hat low, cleaning the rifle with slow, deliberate motions. His face gave nothing away, but his shoulders looked heavier than when he'd first lifted her from the dust of town. Mara moved among the ruins of the night, picking up charred wood, dousing embers with water from the well. Her fingers trembled as she worked, though she willed them steady. To keep moving was the only shield against breaking. She glanced once at Coulter. "You put your life between me and them." He didn't look up. Didn't have a choice. "You could have let them take me." That made him pause. The cloth in his hand stilled. "Would have made me less of a man." His words landed hard in the quiet. She turned away, blinking back heat behind her eyes. For years, men had used words to cut her down. This one used them like a shield, even if he didn't mean to. Inside, the cabin felt changed. The walls, the floor, even the bed, they no longer belonged only to him. The night had bound them in a way no preacher's hand ever could. Not love, not yet, but something rawer, survival shared. When she scrubbed the skillet for morning bread, she caught sight of her wrists, raw, bruised, rope burn from clutching too hard at her shawl in the night. Shame rose sharp in her throat. She pressed her sleeve down, hiding the marks. Later, Coulter limped out to mend the north fence, leaving her alone with silence. She sat by the fire, staring at the Bible on the shelf. Its pages were stiff, edges yellow. Her husband had carried one too, but it hadn't saved him from the snow. Now she wondered if words alone could ever save anyone. Toward evening, she walked to the creek. The cottonwoods whispered overhead, leaves silvering in the wind. She knelt to wash the soot from her hands, watching the water carry it away. For a moment, she let herself weep, silent, the way a widow must, when no eyes could see. Behind her, the crunch of boots on gravel. Coulter stood a few paces back, rifle slung, his face unreadable. He did not ask why she cried. He only said, "You'll stay here, no matter what they say." She wanted to ask why her, why now, why risk himself for a woman marked by the town. But instead she nodded. And then, from the road, a rider appeared, dust rising, horse foaming. The old man from the church steps. His voice carried, thin but strong. "They won't stop, child. They'll come again. Sheriff's pride won't rest easy. Best be ready." He handed her something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it with trembling fingers. A stone, flat and pale, carved faint with a cross. "Keep it," he said. "Proof you've stood once against the rope. Proof you can again." Mara clutched at her chest, the stone warm from his hand. For the first time, she felt something shift inside, like a scar forming where the wound had bled raw. Not healed, not whole, but living. As the sun fell, Coulter lit the lanterns. Mara set the stone on the windowsill, where all could see. The rope was gone, but in its place was something harder to break. Winter came slow, dusting the buttes white, freezing the creek into brittle glass. The town of Dry Creek moved on, as towns do, but the whispers never died. Mara felt them whenever she rode in for flour or salt, the sidelong glances, the mutters at her back. The sheriff's eyes still followed her, sharp as the blade on his belt, but he did not move against her again. Not yet. At Coulter's ranch, life settled into its rhythm. Fence mending, cattle driven in from the cold ridges, would split till her hands blistered. Each day stacked on the one before, not gentle, but steady. Mara found herself humming sometimes while she worked, low tunes her mother had once sung. She would catch herself, silence quick, as though joy might draw fire. Yet the hum always returned. The stone the old man had given her stayed on the windowsill, pale, carved faint with its cross. Each time the sun rose, light caught its edges, glowing like a small lantern. Visitors saw it, too, and though no one spoke of it, the stone said what Mara never could, that she had survived once, that she bore proof against their ropes. Her scar was invisible but real. Not on her wrist, not on her skin, but somewhere deeper. Sometimes, when she stirred the fire or knelt by the creek, she felt it ache, as if survival itself left its own wound. Yet it was a wound she could live with. Coulter never spoke of that night. He carried on as though mobs and torches were just another chore, like mending fence or oiling the rifle. But in small ways, Mara saw the shift. The way he set her coffee first at the table. The way his eyes searched the horizon when she rode into town. The way his silence had softened, no longer walls but shelter. One evening, When snow lay in thin sheets across the ground, Mara stood outside by the firewood stack. The air smelled of pine, sharp and clean. Overhead, stars spread endless and bright. She thought of her husband's grave, of the shame that had nearly buried her alive, of the rope that once waited in the dark. She whispered, not to Coulter, not to God, but to the night itself, "I am still here." The words hung in the cold, simple and defiant, a truth no crowd could erase. From the porch, Coulter's voice, rough but steady, "And you'll be here come spring. That's enough." She turned. He was just a shadow against the lantern glow, hat brim low, but she saw him all the same. A man scarred, a woman branded, both stitched together by survival. Not a love story, at least not yet, but something older, quieter, carved into bone, the will to endure. The fire crackled low. Coyotes yipped in the distance. The stone gleamed faint in the window. And so the story of Mara Kincaid and Coulter Hayes settled into the dust of the West. Not triumph, not glory. Just a scar and a stone, proof that even in a land quick to hang and slow to forgive, some souls refuse to bow. They say in Dry Creek the rope burned, but the ash still blew across the street for years. Some called her cursed, some called her strong, but all remembered she never broke. And if you pass the ranch even now, you'll see a pale stone on the sill, catching the morning light. So the question lingers, like the wind across the buttes, is survival enough when the world denies you everything else? Or is survival itself the quietest, truest form of victory?